Hi, and thanks for joining me. There's a deficit of socialising, a lack of parties. People have had to put off really significant celebrations as well as just casual good times with friends and family. So much has gone missing in these last few weeks and months. And I see it showing in all the predicted ways after the initial waves of heroic action and so forth. Pretty much any group that I'm looking at and part of and thinking about, I see the fractures, the irritability, the loss of cohesion, that sort of we've just had enough of it. And we want it to change, and yet at the same time we're often a bit nervous about the changes that we're starting to make, and uncertain about where we go. And so we are in that particular state where we're no longer just huddled for security, although some are and have to be. And it's just a mess, and people have had enough, and it really is showing. Suggest, if you don't believe me, this week, look around at any groups or connections you're part of, and I believe you're likely to see the simply the wearing down of normal good behaviours and decency and tolerance, and people just being a bit stretched now. So let's have some reasons to be cheerful, and three parables from Luke chapter 15, which are all completely about being cheerful and having a party. About 15 years ago or so, I led some staff Bible studies for Arusha, Kenya, and I really enjoyed doing them. This particular occasion, I handed everybody a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, and a pencil, and I shared with them the second of those three parables that I just read to you a short time back. The parable about the woman who finds her coin. Well, I asked people just to read the parable, or actually listen to me tell it, and then draw it. Just draw. I'm really bad at drawing, so I just had a go, and then anybody's free because they can't possibly draw as badly as me. So they all drew their picture to show the most significant moment in the parable. That's what I asked them to do. Then I asked them if they were willing to share, and everybody was. So they held up their pictures of this woman looking under the bed, looking behind the cupboard, looking under a table, behind a chair, different parts of a house looking for her coin. All except one. Mishi was a young Muslim woman. She was the most faithful to all the Bible studies of everybody, and came more than the Christians did. And she hadn't heard this parable before, and she hadn't read it before or heard anybody talk about it, so it was simply her first engagement with it. She had drawn the woman dancing. In the background you could see the broom just lying on the ground left to one side. The woman is dancing in this very exuberant manner. It came across in her quick sketch. And I said, Mishi, would you tell us the meaning of the parable? And she said, yes. Okay, Jesus wants us to know how God feels when we turn towards him. And I said, you know what? I almost don't want to say anything. I just want us all to go home now. That's perfect. And the reason Mishi could get it right is she'd never been told to think of this about a lost sheep or a lost coin or a lost or prodigal son. Therefore, she could hear it as it was originally meant. But most Christians have been preconditioned, so they think they're going to have a story about something lost or somebody lost, when that's not the case at all. And I tried to show that in the way I shared the parables. Please go back and read them for yourself and check me on this. The emphasis is nowhere on the lostness. It's absolutely on the celebration. In fact, twice Jesus says that's the whole point in telling the parable. And neither Luke, who tells us the parable, nor Jesus, who originally spoke the parables, would have recognized our titles of lost coin, lost sheep, lost son. Well, I don't know what that's about. Nothing to do with what we're talking about, because they're talking about an emotion of delight in God. No, delight's not strong enough. Emotion of being thrilled to the core in God, an emotion of exuberant celebration. To get to that emotion, we need some drama. So we start with the most appalling offence in the third parable. It's worth just noticing it now. You see, the son at the beginning of the parable does a most extraordinary thing. He's, in effect, says to his dad, "Dad, you're taking too long to die. What you are worth to me is what I get when you die. Actually, what my family's worth to me is what I get when you die. And what the farm that's kept us alive for generations and will keep the next generations alive and ticking, well, what that's worth to me is what I get from it when you die. So since you're not dying quick enough, can I have my share now and then I'm gone?" Well, of course, everybody hearing Jesus tell this is going to go, "That's scandalous." Of course the father is going to refuse. Because think about the first parable where Jesus says, "So you're upset, you guys, about who's attracted to my message. The sex workers and the tax collectors and these people that you reject, and they're all attracted to my message and they gather around to listen to me, whereas you guys just want to criticize the company I keep. Well, but which of you wouldn't go and have a party if you found just 1 out of 100 sheep? Which of you wouldn't celebrate if you find 1/10 of your life savings like that woman did?" But in the third parable, if you ask the question, which of you would do this? The answer is, well, nobody. Nobody'd behave that way. It's irrational, it's unhelpful, it's unjust, it's nuts. Nobody is going to allow that son to walk away with 1/3 of the future of the family tucked up as cash in his pocket, yet exactly what that father in the story does. So his first hearers are going to be going, "That's absurd, that's offensive, that's disgraceful, what an idiot, what kind of a man would behave like that? No, there's nothing for me in this story." It's understanding that this son, in effect, emotionally murders his dad and the family, that we can come to the moment where we see this man running down the road to embrace his returning son. We see that he's actually been waiting and watching, hoping for this moment that probably isn't going to happen, that shouldn't really happen, can't be expected, and yet it's what he's waiting for. And then the moment comes. He's hugging his son, he's kissing his son, he's calling out instructions to restore his son to the full privileges and position of a son of a wealthy household, and he's calling for an immediate celebration. Can't wait any longer. And the emotion has been ramped up 1,000,000 times over talk of finding a sheep or finding a coin. The whole thing was inappropriate at the beginning, and when the son comes home, the inappropriateness just gets worse. I mean, the dad doesn't even let the son finish his apology. The son has come to negotiate a work on the farm as a labourer, not as a privileged member of the household. The son is not looking for restoration. He knows that would be nuts, crazy, and beyond. It'd just be silly to attempt that. And yet that's what happens. This is such a splendid parable. And yet, do you not find yourself thinking that you're a bit in sympathy with the big brother? The guy who says, "Just a minute, this isn't fair. I'm not going to this party. I'm not joining in. I'm going to socially isolate. I'm out. I'm nothing to do with any of this. This is just unjust. It's improper. There's nothing good to be said for it. I cannot get my head round why, Dad, you are behaving in this absurd and unfair manner. And Jesus is telling us, you need to get your head around this, guys, because this is God. This is how God is. And although no dad you know can be expected to behave this way, you can actually imagine it, can't you? Because in human experience, the most dependable love, the most gracious and forgiving love, is parental love at its highest and at its best and at its deepest and at its most sincere and most profound. There's something in parental love that is not present in anything else. And this parable, more than any other parable that Jesus told, I think more than any other parable I've ever read or heard about, is so deep, profound. It reaches right down into the roots of being and aspires right up to the highest of heights. It's many-sided, endlessly fascinating, loads of aspects to it to explore. No other parable is so complex and has so many dynamics playing out. And yet the heart of it is this nuts behaviour of a dad who in the end we have to grudgingly go, yeah, actually somebody just might behave that way. If they loved enough, mightn't they? Maybe. You see, the dad's point to the older son is simple. I haven't shortchanged you of anything. You've been here all the time working away, doing what you're supposed to do. That's great. And everything I have is yours. That's the deal, wasn't it? So if you wanted a goat to celebrate with your friends, you went and got a goat. If you haven't done so, don't blame me. That was your decision. I've not withheld anything from you, son. But you're withholding your love from your brother, who was as dead to us and is alive again, and he was lost to us and is found, and we have to celebrate. We're often so preoccupied with our own stuff that we fail to really register consciously the signs of the love of God. The younger son in the far country was in just that place. But he reached the end of the road. A crisis came upon him. It wasn't COVID, it wasn't a lockdown, it wasn't economic fallout, it wasn't a redundancy, it wasn't any of these things. But he had reached the end of his road and didn't know where to turn. And it was in that situation that, in fact, his memory did start to feed back some information. My dad is a decent guy. He's the only man I know who pays his labourers as much as he pays. They have food to spare. Agricultural labourers in our culture and time don't have food to spare, but my dad's do, because I should go and work for him. But he'd never have me back. Well, maybe he would have. Is there a negotiation that I can have with him somewhere? Let me try. Obviously not reinstated, obviously nothing like that. But he's a decent guy, and I bet there's a bit of love for me left in his heart somewhere. It was enough to get this guy on the road. I bet you've got enough as well. Looking back, thinking about it, reflecting. It's got nothing to do with common sense. Got nothing to do with I can measure the amount of love and assess it and so forth. It's got nothing to do with any of that. This has to do with the gracious love of God, the greatest truth, and the invitation to the biggest celebration ever. It's open, and every church worth its time and space is a place, a community of that love and grace. Or it's a waste of time and a waste of space. One of the two. Grace is everything. Without it, waving your Bibles in the air, following this discipline, it's just a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal is nothing. Only love is something. God bless you. Have a great week and a safe one too, I pray.